Hi, and welcome to this talk about the Readiness Model. This is the model that I use at Practical Buddhist Coaching that simplifies the Pali Canon into a stage-by-stage learning process, which has sessions and exercises that help you put knowledge into practice. And it's all formulated around one central model. But before I get into that, I'll start with an introduction to the Readiness Method. This is Practical Buddhist Coaching's simple model called the Readiness Method, which is designed to reduce everyday unease and mental suffering and to assist in building resilience. It is rooted in Buddhist philosophy and focuses especially on the teachings from the early Buddhist texts, especially the Pali Canon. But all effort has been taken to keep it practical, modern, and to make it easy to apply. In it, you get the big ideas quickly, and then you deepen them through your own lived experience. That is, putting them into practice and trying them out. So in this way, it's not just delivering knowledge, it is encouraging you to put the whole thing into practice. The goal of the entire course and of the model is to help you let go of unhelpful mental baggage and to build more clarity and to be able to understand how unease and suffering comes about, and to give you more strength and more resilience in terms of facing life's realities. And the focus of the whole thing is not to escape from life, but to be able to meet it and align with it more wisely. This course is absolutely not about rigid beliefs. In fact, if you're too locked into fixed views, there are some parts of this course which may challenge you, because what this course is in fact about is loosening rigid beliefs. And therefore you may find it challenging and uncomfortable, and that's quite normal and that's okay. And of course you can always stop at any time. The approach of the course is to be open, gentle, and personal. You test what works for you, and you decide how you want to modify and personalize the approach for yourself. A little bit about me. I come from a background in mental health where I've worked for many years, and I've also done the mindfulness course, which was Cabot Zen style. And apart from that, I've studied Buddhism deeply and explored it in from various perspectives. I'm not a monk, I'm just a fellow traveler looking into how Buddhism and the teachings of the Buddha can assist. Buddhism has helped me because I've had a lot of my own conditioning, especially around beliefs around what was acceptable and what was not acceptable, about how life should be lived or shouldn't be lived. And I was also conditioned to have into a state where I was often looking outwards for my stability and for my approval. And how Buddhism has helped me is it's allowed me to look towards myself, towards my own stability. Buddhism has helped me let go of pressure, striving, holding on to false identities that didn't belong to me, and has helped me to discover more peace, clarity, and self-acceptance. So perhaps you want to take a moment now to pause and ask yourself, what brings you to this video? Is there a struggle that you're facing, a question that you have, or a quiet hope that you wish to address? And that question itself could be the doorway to something important. But now I'd like to move on to explain the readiness model itself. So turning to the diagram. The diagram represents our inner world. It's not about other people. It's not about external events. And the diagram may seem complicated at first or complex, but its structure will become quite clear as we go, and you'll see how it follows and certainly will be easy to understand in a short time. I'm going to give you now a very brief overview, just enough to introduce the core ideas. But the rest of my practical Buddhist coaching courses explore each concept step by step, because each concept can be further expanded on, and also it's important to take that knowledge and then to apply it so that it's always there and ready to be useful for us. So if you do continue to subscribe to this channel, or if you decide to look at the coaching course itself, you'll see that session by session, I focus on individual components, encouraging you to contemplate, reflect on, and personally verify each one. Looking at the diagram, we see that it aligns two things. One, the roots of our suffering, such as the conditioned mind, attachment, expectation, unnecessary passion. And also it shows us the path to peace, including renunciation, Shamatha, Samādhi, and the development of wisdom and other skills. For this explanation, I'm going to begin with awareness, which is the capacity to notice what is arising in our experience right now in the present moment, whether it be the body, sensory input, or our thoughts, body, senses, and mind. So even right now, if you were to reflect, you could become aware to some degree of what is happening for you in terms of your body. You could even direct your awareness to the body. You could direct the awareness to the senses. And you could also be aware of what is arising in the mind. Early in life, we exist in an unconditioned mind. It's receptive, it's unfiltered, without strong identity or preferences. However, over time, we develop a conditioned mind. It becomes shaped by our experiences, our beliefs, and develops an identity based on our opinions and preferences. The conditioned mind tends to react quickly. It judges our experiences constantly. It filters what we experience through the personal checklist of beliefs, opinions, and preferences. And as it does, it gives rise to unnecessary passion. It creates, because of its many conditions, an excessive drive to control, to be recognized, or to seek pleasure, or to have or not have certain things. Also, in the drive towards chasing the things that we think are good, we create blind spots. So we don't tend to notice the things that we already have. We don't tend to notice inconvenient truths, such as the shortness of our lives, or the fact that things can change very easily, or that the world is in fact out of our control. Unnecessary passion also creates a huge amount of inner pressure, a push and a pull on us constantly towards things or away from things, and it really doesn't let up very much. Now, reality, which we can see at the base of the diagram, is made up of things that are unavoidable: change, sickness, aging, and death. And the fact that we are limited and embodied within the bodies that we exist in, the minds that we exist in, and we are entrapped within those bodies and minds. We can't exit them, we're subject to them. And that's the nature of reality. So, when unnecessary passion meets with reality, we tend to suffer. Unnecessary passion created a lot of expectation, created a lot of drive. And when those expectations meet with reality, the truth of change, the truth of sickness, of aging, of death, then we find that our expectations meet with conflict. We expected something good to happen, but unfortunately, reality didn't comply. And this collision of expectation plus reality can produce the pain, which is unease and suffering. So then what is the answer? The answer then is to tame our passion and instead realign with reality. Because if we understand what I've explained so far, that unnecessary passion tends to cause suffering because it will collide with reality either now or later, then the best thing to do is to loosen the grip of unnecessary passion in our lives. And the diagram points us towards 4 interwoven practices that can help unnecessary passion be removed. They are renunciation, Shamatha, Samādhi, and the development of wisdom. These tools, they don't suppress passion. They just clarify it so that we can discern it clearly. And then they help us shift from compulsion to having a choice as to whether we follow passion or not. I'll start by talking about renunciation. Renunciation is being able to say courageously no when we notice that unnecessary passion has arisen. When we recognize that, we decide and refuse to not act out on those conditioned habits that cause harm. Shamatha is the practice of being able to bring calm and ease into our experience and into our bodies and into our mind. To do it with so much skill that we're able to do it, if necessary, on demand. So whatever experience we might be having an automatic reaction to, we can interrupt our reactivity with the ability to rest, to return to the breath, to relax the body, and introduce equanimity, which is balance, to the mind. When the mind is calm and peaceful, then unnecessary passion becomes clear as unnecessary. The next practice is Samādhi. And this is where a number of previous things that we've talked about all come together. As I'm talking to you now, you're developing what we could call fundamental wisdom. You're understanding how unease comes about. And that's a form of wisdom. And if we mix that with our ability to simply say no to acting out on passion through renunciation, and our ability to calm ourselves on demand, such as in Shamatha, then our ability to be calm, mindful, and wise culminates in a more complex skill that allows us to bind those capacities into a single stable practice and state. So in Samadhi, we recognize passion the moment that it arises. through global mindfulness that can be mindful of body, senses, and mind. And then we are able to not act on it through the power of renunciation. And we're able to enjoy and accept it as it is and remain calm without tipping into acting or suppressing. And then through wisdom, we can dissemble whatever unnecessary passion we have into its mental components. And this is achieved through the model of dependent origination, which makes up part of stage 4, Samādhi, where we can understand how it is that unnecessary passion comes about, how the conditioned mind loops around on itself. We can see each part of unnecessary passion, whether it be the trigger, the things that maintain it, or the seeds which are related to the false beliefs, opinions, and preferences that the conditioned mind has. And so when we can see so clearly, any urge, thought, or tension is then seen not as a command, seen not as a threat, but simply as conditioned noise. And when we have a high level of wisdom, we understand that automatic reactions only have power if we follow them. And we're able to calm ourselves and see them simply as suggestions that we can safely ignore. The culmination of all these practices that we learn throughout these steps, the steps of fundamental wisdom, stage 1, stage 2, renunciation, stage 3, Shamatha, and stage 4, Samādhi, they all have the effect of growing our wisdom, because we're able to see that the basic fundamental model that I'm talking about here is not just theoretical. It can result in being less pushed around by our conditioned mind, having less unnecessary passion, and having more freedom within our mental space. And passion as a result becomes more transparent. It's seen as optional, and it becomes much easier to release it and see it as simply suggestion. And this integration that happens of all the skills that I've talked about, recognition, calm, clarity, and then release, is what allows us to live from freedom and not from compulsion. Wisdom sees what the other practices illuminate, the truth of how life actually works. Freedom comes from being able to align with reality rather than conflict with it. It reveals blind spots that in the past would have fueled bad decisions. It exposes how suffering unfolds, and it interrupts the momentum that loops and old conditioned patterns have before they're able to take over. With practice, wisdom can become fast, automatic, and increasingly effortless, a quiet guidance system that helps us skill, a quiet guidance system that helps us navigate skillfully. And now just a brief word on getting more out of the course if you're interested in doing it. And of course you can simply do it also by subscribing to the channel. But it's important to remember that we can't just take the information that I'm sharing today and say, now I will simply act without passion. I won't try to make the world fit my personal list of preferences, because it's not that simple. We've all been deeply programmed by our body's and mind's tendency towards survival, by the habits and reactions, the core beliefs that we've learnt, the preferences that have been programmed into us and hardwired, and the many opinions that have been stored in our minds throughout the years of conditioning. So these automatic patterns need to be recognized and discovered carefully, and then rooted and debunked one by one through a careful process of contemplation, of understanding the nature of how these loops form, such as in dependent origination in stage 4, through having a very systematic development of mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of mind, and the various parts of the mind that can lead us astray, such as intentions, preferences, such as liking and disliking, and also things like core beliefs. So core beliefs, for example, being that a person only has value if they are rich. If that's a core belief you have, then it could be a source of a lot of unease. And that's why the rest of this YouTube channel, the rest of this course, the things I talk about are so detailed and are as thorough as they are. You need to learn to identify unnecessary passion and the conditioned mind, not just in your thoughts, but it can manifest in the body, such as tension or as held breath. And it can also happen with the senses. The senses are hardwired to be able to trigger us very quickly. So we have to be able to notice when our senses are dragging us towards suffering. And so you need to develop calmness, Shamatha. You need to develop wisdom, fundamental wisdom, and also the wisdom that comes across the whole of the learning package. You need to be able to say no through the power of renunciation. Now, no in a way that you're able to endure without acting on passions, and also without suppressing them, because then you never deal with them. You never process them. So it's a process of being able to see situations that once would have triggered automatic reactions with new eyes, stage by stage, session by session, chapter by chapter. With exercises and practices, you can build those skills gradually. And for those who want to be more independent, you can simply look at this model that I've made, and you can use that as a way to structure your own personal learning. So I'm not saying that you have to do it this way. But the course is meticulously structured and intentionally simplified because it's easy to get caught in the details. And if you do the work, and if you engage with the practice and the reflections, then you'll find that the theory will naturally become a part of you and how you do things. And with persistent effort, insights will arise naturally. You'll suddenly realize that, oh my gosh, all this time I've been chasing this core belief without even realizing it. Oh my gosh, I had this opinion which I was creating a lot of drive in me. And you can see those things, see that they're not valid, they're not helpful, and then you can start to use Samādhi to train yourself to let them go. And when true wisdom begins to take hold, whatever progress you make is never really undone. You have good days and bad days, but the progress is definitely always there. And that's when you notice that small amounts of freedom at first, but gradually increasing freedom can become a lived reality. So for those who just wanted to know more about the model, then I've just talked about that. But if you would like to know more about the course structure, or perhaps you're planning to take what you already know and just see how it fits within the structure that I would recommend, I'm just going to talk about the course structure here. And certainly it's applicable for people who have already done this sort of stuff before. So this course and the skills that you develop in this course are all part of a gradual and structured process. And I think that the correct sequence is essential, and certainly if you look at the Pali Canon, It's also described that following the correct sequence is beneficial towards achieving the desired outcomes. And not doing it in the correct order can lead to frustration and stagnation. And one common example would be that often people want to jump straight into meditation. But meditation without fundamental wisdom can just be just sitting and focusing on breathing, which might be nice. But if you don't know how it's helping you if you don't understand the conditioned mind, unnecessary passion, if you can't discern unnecessary passion from necessary passion, the need to have basic things like shelter, a safe psychological space, good relationships. If you can't discern those necessary things from the unnecessary stuff, then meditation in itself is, if it's not part of an organized structure, won't necessarily help you. It might feel good in the moment, however, which is fine. But if you know that the goal is to let go of unnecessary passion, to build wisdom, and that you know that unnecessary passion is the product of the conditioned mind, then you can draw yourself closer and you can work using something called wise attention towards a more unconditioned awareness that underlies the noise of the ego and the usual excessive mental chatter that we experience. And at first, much of our efforts to align with this can become part of the noise because we are using our egos to strive. And much of our learning in this course can be co-opted by the conditioned mind and by the ego. Our sense of identification and getting involved with things, making them into a goal, making them into status, a way of controlling the world. And so it's quite normal that a course like this at the beginning may become very goal-orientated, may become a source of your identity, in so much as you might use it to make yourself feel superior, to build up your sense of ego. And it can also become quite easily a trigger for more conditioned thoughts. But I think the value of this model is that you can always use it to bring you back to the fundamental goal that you're trying to achieve. And throughout the course, we explain why ego tends to create more problems, how it unaligns you with the nature of reality. So there's a lot of guidance to avoid those things that will probably happen to some degree. And so as a result of this course, the mind may fight back and produce a lot of commentary saying it's too hard, I'm doing it wrong, this process doesn't work. Or you might feel, in contrast, like you're suddenly becoming super enlightened, you're levitating above everyone else. Or you might go through times when you have extreme lack of faith in the process. And all of these sorts of undulations are to be expected. And so the process can be challenging until we see clearly that we're not actually creating something new. We're not looking for this enlightenment. We're actually looking for a removal of a bunch of stuff that was added and that was creating the problem. And that when we get down underneath to that simpler existence, that is the awakening. So it's a removal process rather than an adding process. And the process can definitely feel like effort, but these are all necessary stages. So when I look back at my own experience, I used early insights to reshape how I approached relationships and work. And definitely there were times when some of those changes weren't actually steps in the right direction, mainly because I was still trying to make something different. I was trying to control those things, but from a different angle. But as I progressed, I stopped pushing. Stop trying so hard with those relationships and simply let things be. Stop trying so hard with work, just let it be. And eventually those things settled. And settled not because problems were fixed, but because I accepted that the nature of reality is to not conform with my preferences. So now let's look a bit more at the structured path. Liberation takes time, and just like learning a skill such as losing weight, learning how to use weights at the gym, overcome an addiction, or training a dog, this path requires time, effort, and patience. And expecting instant success is unrealistic. This work involves uprooting deep and conditioned habits and desires. So here's a diagram that outlines the structured progression that I suggest, which goes from foundational practices to more advanced stages. And I'll just talk to it. The fundamental wisdom stage is focused on the kind of thing that we're doing right now. We look at the model that I've created, which is based on the Pali Canon, and we establish a basic understanding of things like the reason that we suffer unease. That is, we understand the problem. And we also learn fundamentally what the solution is. And as I said, renunciation, Shamatha, Samadhi, development of wisdom. And these are all part of, in Buddhism, what is called the Eightfold Path. And by understanding the nature of the problem and the solution, we've understood the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. In the ethics stage, we move on to renunciation. Whilst ethics might sound like there's a lot of rules and things like that in there, ethics is mainly about what we don't do in terms of not acting on unnecessary passion. So it's pretty simple in that way. Unnecessary passion may involve things like wanting to dominate, wanting to control, wanting to have, wanting to enjoy, those sorts of things. But when we're able to not do those things, that is ethical for us because it actually reduces our unease in the long term, because it helps us align with the way reality is, because reality wants to take things away. And so if we are getting a lot of things, then eventually we have to part with them because of change, because of sickness and aging and death. So renunciation is about being satisfied with a whole lot less, but also gaining a huge amount of gratitude for the things that we have, for those necessary passions that we are meeting generally all the time. And it's the unnecessary passions that are causing problems. And so renunciation is enacted through right speech, which is not having passion in our speech, right action, not acting on passion, and right livelihood, which means that we don't take up jobs which are based on unethical and passion-driven activities, such as selling guns or selling drugs, so on and so forth. And it involves the 5 and 8 precepts which we discuss, and also we look at right intention, so how to act and know what your intentions are when you are acting, and renouncing harmful desires, fostering goodwill, and practicing harmlessness in our lives, and letting go as much as possible to any core beliefs, views and opinions, speech, that sort of thing, which might lead to attachment. So that's the focus of the ethics stage. But it's also a lot about the wisdom that is necessary to understand ethics. Because the wisdom part is knowing that actually when you don't act on unnecessary passion, you're actually not missing anything. You're actually gaining something. And that's the wisdom part that we spend a lot of time understanding. The next stage is the Shamatha stage. And this stage focuses on the foundational meditation and mindfulness skills. And the focus of this stage is that before we're able to respond without reactivity towards the conditioned mind and unnecessary passion, we need to have the ability to calm ourselves right down. And that's what Shamatha is about, the cultivation of Shamatha, to reduce overactivation. And so in this stage, we learn basic presence. Presence being awareness, being able to be present here and now to what we're seeing, feeling in our bodies. So our senses, our body and our mind as it is now, rather than getting caught in the conditioned mind and all its narratives. So being present right now, I can be aware of this room, my body and my breathing, and the nature of the content of my mind as it is now, without getting caught in stories. And that's what presence is. And it's a very energizing process to be present. We learn about postures, such as half lotus, lying meditation, walking meditation, and breathing techniques. And of course, mindfulness of breathing is in there. Mindfulness of breathing being the core way that if everything else is happening, you can always bring yourself back to your breath. And if you think about if you were going through something very difficult, such as childbirth or extreme pain, often you find it useful to focus on your breath. It's like that lifeline that you have. And when powerful judgments, stories, and drives are coming from your conditioned mind, then that's where you should go to. Return to the breath. Use shamatha. Cultivate calm. And when you cultivate calm and you feel truly relaxed, then a feeling of equanimity naturally comes about. And then you feel a sense of that you can work through the conditioned mind. You can work through the unease. So in the Shamatha stage also, we develop and begin developing mindfulness. Mindfulness of feeling tone or preferences, unpleasant, pleasant, noticing our preferences. We develop mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of intention, and mindfulness of body, and mindfulness of breathing. But it will be only in the Samadhi stage that we will be able to bring mindfulness completely to a conclusion by learning about dependent origination. Being able to be mindful of how the ego and how the conditioned mind is triggered and tends to loop upon itself. And then when we can recognize that, mindfulness is complete. We also learn about sensory restraint in Shamatha stage because the senses are often a trigger for the conditioned mind and for unnecessary passion. The fourth stage is the Samadhi stage. And so by the time we get to the fourth stage, we have developed an excellent ethical foundation through renunciation, an ability to calm ourselves very well through shamatha, and we have fundamental wisdom that was developed in stage 1. But through the development of renunciation and the development of shamatha and its accompanying equanimity, vast amounts of wisdom are added to our experience. to our understanding. And as a result, we are able to deepen wisdom. And from that, we're able to move on to constructing a Samadhi practice. And the key components necessary for that is the complete mindfulness, as we discussed, the ability to observe passion in the body, senses, and mind, and also the loops of the conditioned mind, the triggers and the things that maintain it, and the core beliefs of the conditioned mind. And that loop, in a way you could say, is how ego gets involved. And then we master Samadhi itself using the acronym READINESS, R standing for recognition, E for the ability to endure unnecessary passion, A for accepting it, D for seeing that unnecessary passion leads us to danger, so the awareness that we needn't follow unnecessary passion. I is for identify, understanding where from this passion has arisen, how was it triggered, what core belief does it connect to, how is it being supported by the ego. And then the wisdom that we've developed throughout the course helps us see that unnecessary passion is simply a suggestion. So it's not self, it's empty, it has no power unless we give it power. It's subject to change, it tends to go away pretty quick if we're able to not act on it. And also it's a source of suffering, so best not follow it. So using the acronym of readiness, we manage passion when it arises using awareness, calming, and wisdom to neutralize it into just being a background noise. And this is cultivated over a long period as we systematically recognize and understand each habit of passion. Through a slow period of contemplation meditation and contemplations, which don't have to only happen in meditation, we are able to look at our experience and begin to see the conditioned mind, the ego, and unnecessary passion very clearly, and we can see the danger very clearly because we've observed it happen before, and we gradually are able to increasingly let go. We learn about right effort. So when passion arises, we aim to understand its root and respond with dispassion. We're able to stop reinforcing automatic patterns, and thereby we allow them to dissolve. And we can learn to direct the mind towards higher mental states by cultivating some other things that we learn about in stage 4. The 7 factors of enlightenment, which support Samadhi, which include things like mindfulness, energy, joy or rapture, investigation, which is from dependent origination, and also tranquility, equanimity, and concentration, which is related to Samadhi itself. We also practice the 4 divine abodes because they help us really appreciate the things that we have already. When we meet the needs of necessary passion, when you have shelter, when you have support, when you have food, when you have a world that supports you, when you can develop gratefulness, compassion, loving kindness, you can create mental states that are blameless, which have no downside, and that you can generate at any time in order to bring a wholesome quality to your mind. And this helps us sustain and protect our progress. So at the conclusion of the 4th stage, participants have sufficient knowledge to be able to construct their own personal shamatha, which can address their conditioned mind on its own terms. This process, of course, can take weeks, months, or years, depending on your own conditioning, your life context, and of course, how much practice you put into being able to renounce, being able to calm yourself through shamatha, being able to contemplate in order to support samadhi, to put energy into samadhi, balance that samadhi through the use of the enlightenment factors, to be able to discern using wise attention when you're trending upwards towards a lighter state of mind, a more unconditioned state, or when you're trending downwards into unnecessary passion, addiction, into compulsive reaction. And so then it all becomes about how much energy you put into that process and how much dedication. And of course, having good guidance helps too. So, what we discover throughout this process, and hopefully through this talk you might have taken a glimpse of it too, is that the decision to continue feeding the conditioned mind or to abandon the conditioned mind is actually a choice that we make or don't make again and again. And when a person completes stage 4, what happens then in terms of advanced practice? Well, once you have experienced for yourself your own type of samadhi and you've made it to one that works for you, you'll find that you can actually successfully weaken the conditioned mind. And when you see that a major shift occurs, it naturally motivates you. You realize that all you have to do is persist. And also the process becomes increasingly effortless. Living without the conditioned mind begins to feel good, like dropping a heavy weight. And increasingly you begin to see things as they are. You begin to understand that life isn't about achieving goals or finding meanings or doing specific things. Life becomes increasingly more about just this present moment. And all the shoulds and the should nots are released. And the true joy comes from being freed from all that. And when the conditioned mind is no longer telling you all the things that you should or shouldn't do, you realize that everything is equal. If you want to dance, then dance. If you want to spend time with people, then spend time with people. And there will be a whole bunch of things that the conditioned mind would have been saying, don't do that. Go and get a job, go and get rich. But when you have subdued the conditioned mind and taken back your autonomy, you discover a huge amount of enjoyment in things that you had been not even noticing. Fresh air, walks, friendships. So the advanced stage is very much about continuing samadhi. And you will have adequate wisdom that you can support yourself and progress individually. You won't need people like me, podcasts, you won't need YouTube channels. You'll be able to direct yourself to resources such as the Pali Canon. So I hope that this talk has been useful, and certainly if you're not looking to follow this channel or get involved with the resources that I've created, that's fine. But maybe you've learned something in terms of how to approach your practice. And I truly hope that this is useful